Hello, folks. Welcome. Just going to give everybody a minute to filter into the session. Welcome. Just letting everybody take a minute or two to find their way into the session before we get started. All right. I think we're starting to slow down for participants coming in. So welcome, everybody. My name is Jake Goldblum. My pronouns are he, him, and I am one of the associate directors for Global Network first year programs. And today I am joined by our colleagues from the London Residence Life team, as well as some of our colleagues from Boston as well, who are in the background and supporting questions and other pieces that come up. So this conversation today is about Yugo the Curve and Queen Mary, the temporary housing plan that folks were notified about yesterday. So thank you for joining us. If you aren't able to stay the whole time, totally understand. If you have family members or folks who aren't able to join today, the session is being recorded, so no worries if you need to jump off early. We'll be sending this out as soon as possible to folks. The plan is tomorrow, but ultimately, the goal is to get it out to you before the end of the week so that folks have the ability to refer to this as soon as possible and when needed. So no need to take notes or anything like that. Certainly feel free to, but we also have the Q&A box. And as always with our webinars, we're not able to go into specific instances. So we can't answer questions about specific situations in this session, but we will be answering general questions, frequently asked questions that pop up. So if you do have a more general question, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. We also have our team here supporting us in the background who can answer some questions in the Q&A box. But then if we see major themes and trends pop up, we'll also answer those in our conversation with the Residence Life team. So that'll be towards the end of the conversation is that conversation with Jess and Ben, our Residence Life team, who we have here today. But before that, they have a presentation which is going to go over most of the logistics of this plan, and it's very comprehensive. So I think that this should answer most pieces. And then if that doesn't, I think our conversation will answer a lot of the remaining questions. But of course, if things do pop up, feel free to put it in the Q&A. And then we will have our contact information at the end of the session as well. So with that, I want to turn it over to my colleagues, Jess and Ben from the London Residence Life team. Jess and Ben.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jess Coverdale, and I am the acting head of resident services. As Jake mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague, Ben Piggott. He's one of our Residence Life managers, and will be the Residence Life manager overseeing this temporary housing plan, as well as the students who reside in Yugo for the semester or year. So before we truly get into the details, I just wanted to share what we'll be covering today. So we'll talk a little bit about how we've allocated rooms and roommates, where Queen Mary is located. We'll touch on the student journey, what students should expect while they're at Queen Mary. And then, as Jake mentioned, we'll go into a conversation with myself and Ben, where we'll hopefully dive into the details of the questions you have. If I could get next slide, please. So as has been shared, there will be a short delay with the move-in at Yugo the Curve accommodation building. It will, without a doubt, be ready for move-in on September 5th. So to prevent any delay to student arrival and to ensure that they can all participate in the Welcome Week and orientation program that has been meticulously planned by our student life team, we opted to secure housing at Queen Mary to ensure that students could still arrive as planned and attend all the wonderful activities that we have. I wanted to take a moment and stress that this plan it covers all students in Yugo this year, so that is both the London and Global Scholars programs. It also extends to the staff that will be working and living at Yugo, as well as our undergraduate students too, that contract with us privately. So I just really wanted to make it clear that this wasn't a Scholars only impact that it is a delay with our accommodation provider, and therefore multiple avenues have been impacted, and we are making accommodations for them. So, since allocations went live, we've been getting a lot of questions about how our allocation process works, and I wanted to take a time to share some further information on that. So as has been mentioned throughout our communications in the summer, allocation is run on a randomized lottery system. So it's a computer algorithm that takes student preferences and their successful roommate matches and compares them to available rooms. So if a student preferences an apartment or an ensuite, and those spaces have been filled by other students prior to when the system pulls their name, they would have been allocated to the next best available room, which for our students would be a studio space. There are some barriers to receiving a roommate allocation, right? It could be that there was not a direct pairing, meaning that student A requested student B, but student B did not request A. And we're not able to disclose the details of student applications, so that might be a reason why a roommate match wasn't 100%. Students could have listed roommate requests in different orders, which prevents that magic 100%. So if your student or yourself listed a student in top spot, but they might have listed you as third as like as a quad. If a quad was full when it comes to pulling sort of the two beds, it wouldn't have counted as 100% match. There were students who requested a multiple occupancy space with no roommate information, so that's not given as a priority. And then multiple occupancy spaces were filled by our students just based on the way the computer algorithm fills. To give you an idea of the process, we allocated 1,001 students to just 1,015 beds that are available for the scholar programs. The remaining 14 rooms are held through the semester as emergency spaces. We tend to utilize these when students need short-term, so less than 48-hour accommodation changes. This is very usual practice for NU London. It's very common across US housing providers as well. But I just really wanted to emphasize that every available room for the scholar programs has been allocated and is accounted for by a global or London Scholar student. In regards to roommate requests, this year we had an unprecedented amount of roommate requests. It is abnormal. We usually see higher requests for studio spaces, and as such, we acquire a lot more studio spaces. To put it really into perspective, we had 660 student requests for a multi-occupancy bed, meaning they had a roommate request, but we only have 360 available to be able to accommodate these requests. And as I said, like our third-party accommodation providers consist primarily of student spaces. In the accommodation that we partner with, it is very common to find studio spaces over roommate spaces. Next slide, thank you. So, to get us started on where students will be staying, as mentioned in the email, they'll be staying at Pooley House, which is located on Queen Mary, University London's campus. The physical address is on the slide, but we really wanted to emphasize that this is located within Queen Mary's gated campus area. It's within 5 minutes walking distance of Mile End Park, which is an absolutely fabulous park. And as you can see from the image, it's located right next to a beautiful canal as well. Residence Life has partnered with neighboring residence halls literally next door last academic year. And so we're very familiar with the Queen Mary area, the Queen Mary campus, as well as the local area, which really played into the decision to partner with this provider for the temporary plan, because our staff are really equipped to assist students who will be living here. And I'm going to hand over to Ben, who will talk through the student journey and what students can expect.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jess. So as you can see on this table, this breaks down the 4 days, 3 days for some that students will be in Queen Mary, and talks about the transition to Yugo the Curve. So on Saturday, August 31st, we have our London scholars arriving and checking into Queen Mary. On Sunday, September 1st, our global scholars check in. While our Global Scholars students check in to the Pooley House at Queen Mary, our London Scholars students will be going through their visa checks and enrollment on campus. All of our London Scholars will be escorted by a member of our Residence Life team from Queen Mary to campus. They'll get to check out the campus area, do all of their enrollment, and then they will be free to go and do some other activities while our students check into Queen Mary. On Monday, our London Scholars will have lots of different activities that they can join. Please keep an eye on your emails for emails from Student Life about Welcome Week activities. And while our London Scholars are doing some activities, our Global Scholars will do their visa checks and enrollments. Just like the London Scholars, you will have members of Residence Life that will escort students from Pooley House on Queen Mary's campus to Devon House to complete these checks. Once they're done, students can then partake in the different activities hosted by Student Life. On Tuesday, we have our mandatory orientation sessions and convocation. This is taking place at the O2 Arena in Greenwich. Once again, you'll have members of Residence Life that will chaperone students to the O2 to participate in orientation. After orientation, there are lots of events planned at the O2. Again, keep an eye on your emails for more information about that students can partake in. On Wednesday, we start our academic festivals that are broken down by college. So some students will be at our campus building to participate in the academic festival. Other students will have activities both on and off campus that they can join in for. Any student that needs to go to an academic festival because it's their college's day will be able to go there. They'll have been to Devon House before, but we also have staff on site if they need any help. And then on Thursday, any colleges that did not do their academic session on Wednesday will come to campus. They'll participate in their academic session, and then there are activities on Thursday. Thursday is also the day for check-in at Yugo the Curve. We will go in depth about sort of what that Thursday will look like with the checkout at Queen Mary and the check-in to Yugo the Curve a little bit later on. But as you can see, we do have a very packed week for all of our students, and all of our students are able to participate fully in all of the activities that are planned for them during this week. So what to expect at Queen Mary? So all students will be assigned to an ensuite room. This is a mix of 5 to 7 students. All bedrooms are private, and because they are en suites, it also means that they have a private bathroom attached to the bedroom. Students will then have access to a kitchen. However, they will not have kitchen utensils or supplies supplied to them at Queen Mary, just to stop sort of the transport of things that are not necessary. And so that's part of the reason that we have the food offered to students at Queen Mary. Security, so Pooley House is located on Queen Mary's gated campus. There's security at the front gate. So it's incredibly secure. As Jess mentioned, we did partner with the building next door, so we have a good relationship with their security team. As I mentioned, we will have members of Residence Life working with our students, both during their time at Queen Mary as well as their time at Yugo the Curve. All of the staff members that live at Queen Mary will also live at Yugo. So the students, the staff that your student interacts with on sort of their first days will be the staff that they're able to interact with throughout their time here at Northeastern University London. And then students will be provided with breakfast and dinner on all of the days that they are at Queen Mary. Again, this is because kitchen packs will not be provided until they move in to Yugo the Curve. And again, this is to just kind of cut down on the amount of items that will need to be transported from one location to the other. In terms of the campus commute, upon check-in, all Global and London students will receive an Oyster card, which allows them free transportation within zones 1 and 2 of London. All of our accommodations, our campus building, and all of the Welcome Week activities fall within zones 1 and 2. So regardless of which building our students will live in, they are able to get to all activities, both mandatory and optional, using that Oyster card. Again, for all of the mandatory activities, our staff will be escorting students so that they can become familiar with the public transportation around London. There are multiple tube lines located near Queen Mary. The Circle, District, and Hammersmith and City lines are some of the best connected lines in terms of ones that go to central London. And then there are also bus lines easily accessible from Queen Mary's campus as well. It's very common for our students to use public transportation, both just to sort of get to activities that they would like to participate in, as well as some of our co-curriculars. And so we, regardless of residence hall, encourage students to begin using public transportation. And so all students will be using public transportation to get to orientation at the O2. Students living in the Mile End area last year reported that there were no issues with the commute, and they were able to get to everything just fine. Again, during Welcome Week, staff will be able to assist students to all mandatory activities, and detailed transportation instructions will be provided for any optional events that students might sign up for. So as I mentioned, Thursday is both the checkout at Queen Mary as well as the check-in to Yugo the Curve. So I wanted to dive a little more deeply into what that day will look like. Students will check out of Queen Mary by 9 o'clock in the morning. NU London will be transporting luggage from the Queen Mary's building to Yugo the Curve on behalf of the students. Luggage drop-off begins at 8 a.m. and we do ask that students stick to the maximum of 2 bags that was communicated to you in your arrivals communications. Luggage tags will be provided for students. So it's a very similar system to the luggage transport for arrivals. Staff members will guide students to Yugo in small groups using the public transportation. Any student that needs to go to their academic session will go to their academic session and they can check in. For some, it will be after their academic session. For some, it will be before. More information about which specific slot students will be in will come a little later. And then for check-in at Yugo the Curve, students will check in and collect their keys starting at 10. All students will have new kitchen and bedding packs in their room upon their arrival so they can set their room up. Staff members will be hosting both tours of the building and of the local area to get them acquainted with things like grocery stores, as well as stores to pick up things like towels or decorations. Luggage will need to be collected from the staff members. So once it's dropped off, we will be communicating to students that their luggage has arrived and the students can come and pick up their 2 bags, and light refreshments will be provided on the day.
All right, great. Thank you, Justin. Ben, I think that was a great overview to start the conversation. And so, Ben, we'll start with you with some questions that have popped up. Specifically, you mentioned the support the students will have from arrivals to the check-in at Yugo the Curve. Could you just go a little bit more into what that support looks like from the Residence Life staff?
Of course. So all of the students at Queen Mary and at Yugo will receive the same support as any other student in the program. So this means that there will be live-in staff members that are on site at Queen Mary and at Yugo the Curve to assist students during their check-in, their transition, as well as their entire time that they are here. Those staff members will be the same, so there's that level of continuity for students. In addition to the other supports, such as the 24/7 on-call number that we provide, Queen Mary also has an on-site security team. We also have institutional supports that are available, such as our student support and development team, so our students are supported holistically.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ben. And I also know that myself and some of the other Boston team will be in London for arrivals as well and supporting as best we can for the week. And so I think, Jess, we'll go over to you next. could you explain the meal situation and just kind of the difference between the meals slash the kitchens at Queen Mary and Yugo the Curve?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Ben mentioned earlier, we will not be providing kitchen packs for students when they arrive at Queen Mary. And so to accommodate this, we are utilizing Queen Mary's cafeteria, on-site cafeteria, which is run through their university, and students will have access to breakfast and dinner during their stay at Queen Mary. Unlike Queen Mary, when they transition into our accommodation providers, and not just Yugo, but all of our accommodation providers don't have independent catering options, such as a cafeteria. We therefore provide fully equipped kitchen packs to all students, as they will have access to either their private kitchen if they're in a studio, or a shared kitchen if they're in an ensuite. And they'll be able to cook for themselves, right? Make group meals. A lot of our students will come together and host potlucks using the communal spaces in the buildings. But that really is the main difference. It is very common in UK accommodation not to have cafeterias. And we have always worked with students on making sure they feel confident and comfortable in using their kitchen to cook.
Amazing. Thank you, Jess. All right. And so Ben, I think we'll go back to you. Another question that looks like we have is students and families might be wondering how they can best prepare for arrivals with everything that we understand about the situation now. So from your team's perspective, any thoughts that you have on that?
Absolutely. So I guess the big thing that we would suggest is that students hold off on buying larger items for their room until they move into Yugo. Students should make a list of all the things that they, think they might need in terms of decorations, soft furnishings, which they can then purchase later on in the welcome week after they've moved in. Please do not email anything to Queen Mary or Yugo until after students have checked in. And if any student is wondering what they should bring, they can ask in their RLC webinar, where they can also learn a little bit more about Queen Mary and Yugo. In addition, I'd ask that parents do their best to support their child during this time and know that it is for a short amount of time in the grand scheme of their time here in London.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Ben. All right. And I think, let's see, Jess, we'll go back to you. So some students and families might be wondering about changing rooms. So can students move rooms? And if not, can you just explain a little bit about that process?
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned earlier, at this moment in time, all of our rooms have been allocated out to students who will be joining us in the fall. For those who may have reached out already via email, we have been explaining that there is a room change process that opens at the end of September. And the reason for this is we go through an enrollment period, so we really need accurate information as to which students have arrived in London and which students will no longer be joining us on a program. Once we have that information, we can audit our housing, and we get a really accurate detail on what rooms are available for students to move into should they wish to request a room change. So as we approach the end of the first month, and as we get this information, we'll communicate with all students the room change procedure. And we ask students to familiarize themselves with the document that we send out. We'll be really clear with timelines for requesting a room change, and we can then review those requests and offer out what we have available at that time.
Perfect. Thank you, Jess. All right. And Ben, I think we'll come over to you. So again, some students and families might be wondering about other accommodation options or other alternative accommodations while during this time frame, between arrival and September 5th. Do you all have any thoughts on those questions?
Yeah, so the Global Scholars and London Scholars are residential programs. And so the expectation is that all students live in the university sponsored housing for the duration of that program. So that includes Queen Mary for 4 days and then Yugo the Curve. This is because our residence life staff tend to student concerns in the university sponsored housing. And so we cannot attend any kind of concerns elsewhere. Additionally, students who are not in university-sponsored housing may find that their transition into Northeastern University London and the development of sort of community and making friends might be impacted by not living amongst their peers. And we also wanted to highlight that students and families will not receive reimbursement for any external contracts or accommodations that they may seek out.
All right, great. Thanks so much. So let's take a look here. Jess, I think another question that we have is about reasonable adjustments, or as we know them in the US, accommodations. So if a student has a reasonable adjustment request or an accommodation request, that might impact their situation, as their living situation, either in Yugo the Curve or in Queen Mary. What should they do in that case? Can you give a little bit of context around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have the student support and development team here on the ground in London that works with students to arrange their reasonable adjustments, not only for housing, but for classes as well. And so if there are students that feel as though they would need a reasonable adjustment to their housing that would prevent them from living in Queen Mary, or they would struggle at Yugo, we would ask them to get in contact with the student support and development team now. It's really important, the process, they have to go through a process and submit medical documentation and things like that. And once we receive that, we're able to work with the SSD team and see what is available to adjust the students' housing so that they are comfortable and successful while they're with us here in London. And so certainly if students feel as though they require a reasonable adjustment to their housing, they should reach out to our student support team for more information on that process.
Great, thank you, Jess. All right, so it seems like we have a couple of quite different questions about the roommate assignments and pieces along those lines. So Ben, couple of different questions. So will students have the same roommates at Queen Mary as they will in Yugo, if that's applicable? Because again, I know that some of the spaces could be studios. And uh, and is there any additional information students should know about, timelines about knowing their roommates at Yugo, any of those other pieces about roommate assignments that you can provide information on?
Yeah, absolutely. So for rooms at Queen Mary, we are planning and we are striving to put all students who are in ensuites in the same ensuite and Queen Mary, right? So that they are together from the very beginning. Of course, those allocated to studios will temporarily live in an ensuite cluster with a handful of other students. And we are just waiting for Queen Mary to finalize our placements, and we'll be able to send them out to students, just like the allocation they received yesterday. We'll be sending it to their Northeastern email address, so we encourage them to keep an eye on that, and we'll be able to share their room location with students. In regards to roommate information in general, due to UK privacy law, we're not able to share roommate details with students. And so what we encourage is if you're part of social media groups for the incoming classes or things like that, certainly reach out in those groups and see if you can locate your roommates, but that information is not something we would be able to provide prior to check-in. Students would find out their roommates upon arrival.
All right. Thanks so much. Yeah, and so Jess and Ben, are there any other questions that you see or points that you would like to just bring up as we've kind of navigated through the conversation? And maybe some new points have come up, things that we haven't mentioned thus far. Just wanted to turn it back over to you, see if there's anything else that's popped up.
Yeah, of course. So I think I've seen a couple of people ask sort of what the percentage of Northeastern will be at Yugo. And so what is really exciting for us this year is that the entire building, 100% of the students living in Yugo the Curve will all be Northeastern students, whether that is global scholars, London scholars, or our direct undergrads at NU London. And so it's really going to be a fantastic opportunity to get to know the wider community, and we're really excited for what that brings, because it also allows our staff to get a lot more involved in event planning and sort of use of the communal spaces, because essentially the entire building is as if it would be a sort of northeastern building on the Boston campus. We have the added bonus of working with private providers who able to fix all the maintenance concerns and run the mail system and things like that. So it truly is going to be a great experience and a really efficient experience. And the building has gone under a lot of renovation in the last 12 to 18 months. And so we toured it a couple weeks ago, and we're, really impressed with the amenities that it provides, the communal spaces, the opportunity for students to come together. As I know, we're getting questions about students in studios and how do they connect. Like, there are fantastic communal spaces in Yugo that certainly will bring the groups together.
Amazing. Thanks, Jess. That's super helpful to know and understand. Um, it looks like another question that popped up is just about the kitchen and bedding packs. And Ben, do you think you could go into a little bit of context around what those include?
Absolutely. So the kitchen and bedding packs that students will get when they move into Yugo will have all the items that you need to make a bed. So a fitted sheet, pillows, pillowcases, a duvet or comforter, and a cover. And then in the kitchen pack, we like to say it has everything that you need to cook a basic meal. So it has saucepans, pots, cutlery. So, a dinner plate, side plate, knife, fork, cup, spoon, mug, and then things like can openers, scissors, spatulas. And so again, the students are able to cook kind of a basic meal as soon as they open their kitchen pack. And then anything else, you'll have ample opportunity to go to some of the stores nearby and pick up any specialty items that you would like.
All right. Amazing. Thank you, Ben. All right. And Jess, I think we have a couple of questions about just what the commute, again, I know we talked about this, what the commute looks like from Queen Mary to the different required aspects of Welcome Week, whether it's Devon House or any of the other pieces for the week. So I just want to see if you could share about that. I know you had mentioned previously that last year we worked with a provider that is right next door. So I don't know if you can give any additional context around what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Commute times vary depending on the way students wish to commute, but we find the quickest commute is to use the tube, which again, students can use their travel card to access the tube, and they can go from Stepney Green, which is located to Queen Mary's campus, right up to Tower Hill in about 20 minutes, which is essentially how long it would take students to travel from any of our other buildings on foot. So the mode of commute might look a little different for students, but I would certainly say the time commuting is not different, it's not more. And certainly, as Ben has stated, like, our team will introduce students to all transport options, right? The tube, the bus, things like that, and make sure that they're truly familiar with it. And before students know it, they'll be doing it better than we can. But it is a really easy commute, and I know last year commuting was really important for our students who stayed in the same area. And by the end of their semester, by the end of the year, they were saying that it became so familiar that it certainly didn't cause any troubles for them.
All right. Fantastic. That's great. And as we continue to just kind of look through. Just wanted to see, just pause and again ask Jess, Ben, if you see anything or if anything has popped up that you would like to address. Any other thoughts that you have um, while we are on some questions?
So I've seen some questions asking if parents will be able to view or students will be able to view their rooms in Yugo prior to move-in on September 5th. Unfortunately, we will not be able to facilitate students viewing their room. However, a lot of student accommodation looks fairly similar. And so you can assume that anything that is in the room at Queen Mary, for example, bed, desk, wardrobe, will also be in the room at Yugo. Again, students are provided with bedding and kitchen packs. So there's really nothing other than maybe a towel, which students can bring with them if they wish, that you would need for those first few days.
Amazing. Thank you, Ben. And it looks like I saw one question here about once folks are in Yugo, if we could just reiterate kind of what the room includes. I know that we've mentioned this in some previous webinars, but if we could go over that here for what the room includes in Yugo, as far as like the bed situation, as far as what the kitchen looks like, those pieces, I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Yugo, if you were assigned a studio room, so your housing allocation mentions the word studio, it means that you will be living alone in a self-contained unit. You'll have your private bathroom and a small kitchenette area that consists of plenty of storage spaces, a microwave grill combination oven, sink, counter spaces, and a fridge freezer unit. So the idea is that students assigned or allocated to a studio room will live alone, but they are able to access a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom all within that space that they have. Those that are assigned to an ensuite, you will have a room. It's sort of a room located within a room. And so you'll have a room with a private bedroom and a private bathroom. And then about 6 or 7 of these rooms are all located on one corridor, and at the end of the corridor is a small living space and a shared kitchen. And so when we mention sort of the kitchen packs and things like that, they're all sized to match the number of occupants in that space. So if you're in a studio, you'll get a kitchen pack for one. If you're in an ensuite, you'll get a kitchen pack based on how big your ensuite is.
All right. Thanks so much, Jess. That's super helpful context to have. All right, and so just to continue to take a look through here. Just wanted to open it back up before we move on. Just want to open it back up. Just Ben, any thoughts that you have here about any of the things that we're seeing in the chat?
Yeah, so I think there's a question that's come in about, are we taking will there be opportunities for students to go shopping and things like that? Are we facilitating that? We've talked a lot about facilitating them, getting them to campus and to their mandatory events. Once students have moved into Yugo, because we understand that, we're asking them to hold off on the bigger items and things like that, we are facilitating trips to IKEA and the local mall that fall within free time within Welcome Week. For students they will be staff facilitated, so we'll have staff go with students on tube lines, on buses, to our local IKEA, to our local mall, so students can buy those bigger items that they might want for their room once they've, familiarized themselves with the layout and they have an idea of how they want to utilize their space. What is great, what I personally think is great about the Yugo location is that it's just off Whitechapel High Street. And so in sort of the basement of Yugo, right underneath the building is a Tesco. So there's groceries literally right outside their front door. But as well, right along Whitechapel High Street, there's Sainsbury's and Tesco's, and plenty of different options for them to get groceries if they wish. And there is a store called Argos, which is essentially
Like
like
a Walmart, maybe?
yeah, it's like a small version of Walmart. It's all like a warehouse, and students can go and can either purchase things online or can go to the physical store and purchase things, and then they bring it from the warehouse for students. And they can pretty much get you any electrical appliance, beddings, towels, anything that the students could need, and it's just across the street from Yugo. So it is a really well-placed building in terms of helping students get set up or getting their room set up. But yes, we will be facilitating external trips out into London for those, the IKEA and the mall.
Perfect, thank you. So I think that we have gotten through most pieces of the questions here. And of course, there will be, I think, some individual questions popping up as things as we go through the next few weeks as we prepare for arrivals. We do have our contact information here at the end, which we will share. But two final questions is any notes on the September 5th arrival date? And what are you all excited about for move-in and for the coming year?
Yeah, Ben.
So to address the arrival date, yes, Yugo will be ready on September 5th. Jess and I have viewed the building just a few weeks ago, and we can guarantee that it will be ready for students on their check-in at 10 a.m. on September 5th. One thing that I'm really excited for is the fact that all of the students in Yugo will be Northeastern students. So that means if you're running into a student in the gym, at an event, you know, headed out your door on the way to class, it's really, really easy for these students to make connections with their peers because you're all in the same building. So that's one thing that I'm excited about.
Yeah. I would say I'm excited for students to arrive. Our campus is beautiful. It's in a great area. All of our accommodation buildings are in a fantastic area with great transport links if students want to explore Greater London and beyond. It's easy to get to an airport if they want to take a vacation. I'm just really excited to meet students and have them meet our team because our team is working tirelessly to get ready for their arrivals that first weekend of September.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think we can move on to the next slide. All right, and so we do have some upcoming communications. So like I mentioned at the start, we are hoping to get this recording out to folks by tomorrow and the end of the week at the latest. So that folks can refer back to this session as many times as needed. So please look out for that. August 14th, the accommodation agreements and induction modules will be going out. Towards the end of this month, students will be receiving the Know Before You Go email. So this is students should have received the 1 month to go email, which is kind of a primer for the Know Before You Go. So the 1 month to go email covered, you know, a decent variety of information, but the Know Before You Go is really going to have pages and pages of information for students to go through. Going to have lots of tips, tricks, thoughts about arrivals, notes about the accommodations, welcome week, all those pieces. So it's going to be really important for students to review ahead of arrival. So please be on the lookout for that so it'll be about a week before students arrive. And then the week of August 25th, there will be the Meet Your RLC in Residence Hall webinars. So those are also very exciting. Jess and Ben, anything that I missed here?
We of course will be in further communication just about rooms at Queen Mary, as well as information on how to access dining when at Queen Mary. But again, we will cover all of that in the RLC and Residence Hall webinar on the 25th.
All right, amazing, thank you. And I think we can move on to the final slide. All right, and of course, as always, stay in touch. So this is not We understand that this isn't the last time that we'll be in touch, and we'll be sending out all those communications like we mentioned. If things come up in the meantime, parents and students, feel free to reach out to our program emails. So London Scholars can reach out to londonscholars@northeastern.edu. Global Scholars can reach out to globalscholars@northeastern.edu. And that's our Boston-based programming team. So myself and some of my other colleagues who are on the call today. And then for the Northeastern University London team, for students specifically, because again, we mentioned previously the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation in the UK. The UK-based team can't share information about student circumstances with anyone but the student. So that's why this is essentially students only. So the residence life emails we have here, and then the housing email as well. So I wanted to thank Jess and Ben for a great session, great presentation, extremely helpful. And if we didn't get to your specific questions, please feel free to reach out and we will do our best to get those pieces answered. But thank you all for attending. And again, please be on the lookout for the recording of this session. And yeah, we are so excited to have everybody arriving to London in just a few short weeks now. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be sending the recording shortly.